It's the Growing for Market podcast.
Don't start worrying about what flavor of frosting goes on the cake if you haven't figured out how to make the cake. Like, let's start with the basics. What's your organic matter level? Are you doing cover cropping? Do you have any boron? Like, the thing that happened for me that was so almost embarrassing to admit, but I'm going to admit it because other people need to be embarrassed too. Like, I was so hardcore early in my career, like, I'm not going to buy any stuff. I'm not buying any fertilizer. I'm going to grow it all myself. Because I'm just going to use cover crops. I'm just going to cover crop and cover crop. And it's like, just growing cover crops, this is against Elaine Ingham's teaching, so, shoot me, is not going to create the element boron. If boron isn't in your soil, it's not going to be in the cover crop. And then when you mix that cover crop back in, you did not create boron out of thin air. You got to have to go get some boron and put it on the field. And I was like, woo! How come I didn't get that before?
Hello, and welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, where we talk about growing, marketing, and the business of growing vegetables and flowers for local markets like farmers markets, CSAs, farm stands, and local wholesaling. I'm Andrew Mefford, your host and the editor of Growing for Market magazine for 34 years, the magazine for flower and vegetable market farmers. If you're enjoying the podcast, just wait till you see the magazine. Go to growingformarket.com for more. Also, if you could give us a follow and a rating, it really helps other like-minded people find the podcast. And now, let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free. The Vermont Compost Pre-Buy Sale is back, with 20% off orders placed, paid for, and shipped by October 31st. Since 1993, Vermont Compost Company has grown from a small, local operation to a company supplying premium soils to thousands of successful growers all over the country. Vermont Compost Company carefully sources the highest quality materials and amendments to create manure compost and manure compost-based living soils that are approved for organic growing. In addition to product consistency, growers can depend on Vermont Compost Company as an invaluable resource for a breadth of soil and plant knowledge and the technical expertise it takes to grow organically in an ever-changing environment. Each fall, Vermont Compost Company offers a pre-buy sale to incentivize ordering your spring soil before winter settles in. Early bird customers save 20% on orders placed, paid for, and shipped by October 31st. For more information, visit vermontcompost.com/prebuy or call 802-223-6049. Vermont Compost Company, living soils for organic growing since 1993. Back in 2012, the book The Market Gardener by J.M. Fortier changed the game. It sparked a movement, and the launch of the Market Gardener Masterclass soon after gave growers around the world the tools to turn that vision into reality. Since then, the Masterclass has empowered thousands of farmers worldwide to build thriving businesses rooted in ecological integrity and profitability. This isn't just another online course, it's a complete roadmap to success with practical strategies you can implement right away, step-by-step lessons built from real farm experience, and a global community of growers walking the same path. And now, J.M. Fortier is back with an all-new version, stronger and more comprehensive than ever. The updated masterclass includes expanded modules on farm design, marketing, crop planning, and more from leading experts in the field. It's the most complete small-scale farming course available today, and it's launching now, October 7th. Don't miss your chance. Enrollment is open until October 24th. Visit themarketgardener.com to join today. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Ellen Polishuk to the Growing for Market podcast. Ellen has done so much in farming, it's not possible to get it all into one intro, but to hit the highlights, she has over 25 years of farming experience on Potomac Vegetable and other farms in Virginia. She wrote a series of farmer profiles for this very magazine. Ellen is the co author of the book Start Your Farm, the authoritative guide to becoming a sustainable 21st century farmer. And for the last decade or so, since retiring from farming full time, she's been the mind behind Plant to Profit, where she provides consulting and coaching for farmers. So, without any further ado, welcome to the podcast, Ellen.
Thank you, Andrew. Such a pleasure to be here.
Yes, such a pleasure to have you. In fact, for a long time, I've thought that it would just be a matter of time before we had you on the podcast, and here you are, because I just know you've done so much. It's also fun to have a fellow Virginian, right? Because I know you grew up in Virginia and went to Virginia Tech, and I did not go to Virginia Tech, but I worked on the Virginia Tech research farm for a while, so that's also fun. But for our audience who doesn't know you as well as I do, I'd like you to tell us a bit more about your farming background. And I'll say we can share the article you wrote for Growing for Market magazine about your background in the show notes, because you've done so much. It could take a while if we talked about everything. So we'll put that down there if people want to read more about your background. But I wanted to make sure and give you the opportunity to go a little more in depth on your background, so listeners who don't know you yet can understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I'll be quick because I want us to get to another place. But just so people know how to hear what I have to say, I'm 62 years old. I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and was never supposed to be a farmer. And through many odd coincidences and strange behavior of my own and having a helpful mother, somehow I ended up in agriculture. So my career was with Potomac Vegetable Farms. I got to run one whole location of the farm. It was a 2-location operation. And we grew vegetables, some cut herbs, and some cut flowers, all for retail markets. So CSA, we each had a roadside stand on each location. And we did lots and lots and lots of farmers markets, like 4 or 5 on a Saturday.
Yeah.
So that makes life really interesting. So I grew about 10 acres of product for sale in a 20-acre rotation, meaning 10 acres is making my living and 10 acres is on vacation, preparing to make my living next year. So this was high, a lot of equipment involved and lots of people involved. And it was different time in some ways than it is now. So the landscape is vastly different than it was sort of at the height of my career. So I left the farm in 2017. And now I'm doing full-time consulting work.
Okay. And there's something you just said that I just want to pick out. I think there's a good tip right there for people. You talk about I forget what you called it, the farm vacation or whatever. And I was just looking over the article that you wrote for Growing for Market about your background. And you talked about that idea of cover cropping half the land and cash cropping half the land, because we love that idea too. In fact, I think, I'm not sure if your version of that idea came from the Nordells,
Yes.
but you do mention the Nordells. Okay, because we got that idea from them, and basically the idea it was that, I guess, especially if you're starting a new farm and the land isn't that great, I think a lot of people think about breaking the land up into like 5 or 6 blocks based on, let's say, 5 crop families and 1 block for cover cropping or something like that. And what the Nordells said that we picked up on and did ourselves, and sounds like you did something similar, was to actually cover crop half the land. And I realize that's not possible for everybody. People who have a limited land base may not be able to devote half the farm to cover crop. But I'm thinking whether you're starting a new farm and need to improve the land quickly, or have weed problems or any established problems on a going farm, obviously one way to improve it more quickly is to cover crop half of it.
Yeah.
And that way you're quickly improving, instead of 20% of the land or something, you're quickly improving half of it. So that's a great tip right there.
Yeah. I think of it as anybody who wants to talk to me about farming is going to hear about this at some point in our consult. I encourage people to come up with, if they can't do half, then do a third. If you can't do a third, then do a quarter. But what I want a grower to experience is how well the earth grows after that year of vacation. It's unbelievable how much healing is basically what I would say, right? So how much healing can happen with, in my case, farming in the mid-Atlantic, basically 3 cover crops, all worked in or no-tilled, whatever you want to do. And I mean no-till in a kind of old-fashioned way. That input of all of that carbohydrate and carbon makes such a big difference when you come in and you ask it to grow squash again. It's just, once you do it once, you are so convinced that this is a good idea that you will figure out how to keep getting closer and closer to half and half. It's just delightful.
Yeah, absolutely. If people have the land base, of course, I mean, that's the whole idea, right? Cover cropping is supposed to improve the land. If you can be improving half of your land every year, think about how much faster it's going to get better than if you're only cover cropping 20% or something like that. So,
right. And when your land is better, you don't need as much of it to get the same yield. Right. So it's one of those things like you just got to get started and then it's going to be so good. But yeah, land, you got to have some land.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you tell us a bit about Plant to Profit?
Sure. Yeah. So another story, another day, we can talk about why would somebody want to leave farming? Because, it's kind of a crazy pursuit and people are pretty addicted to it. But anyway, my consulting work really started while I was still farming, and I started doing more teaching, and I was already taking on soil fertility customers to help them read their soil tests and figure out what to use as fertilizer, which we may end up having a little talk about today. So it wasn't like it was cold turkey, but not farming altogether, that was a big deal. And so what I've done over the years is come up with a one-woman show at this point that is coaching and advising farmers on several different fronts. So my production-based work, I would say, is kind of declined, which sort of makes sense because now I'm 9 years out of the field.
Mm-hmm.
And my fertility work, I don't do it as much, basically because it's boring. And what has taken its place is more comprehensive work with going deeper with fewer farms so that we actually kind of talk about finances and economics, and we throw in a little fertility talk because everybody needs better yields, and we do a little talk on what's going on with your labor situation, and then we may even get into market channel and scale. Scale is a really popular issue that people come to me for. And then I do a whole bunch of very nerdy QuickBooks work. Like I've become a QuickBooks ninja, and I never would have guessed that was going to happen in my life, but it turns out I love it. I love working in QuickBooks, and I love helping farmers stop hating QuickBooks and to make friends with it and harness the power of that software to help them run their businesses better. So it's a pretty cool suite of activities that I get to do. And I do, beyond that one-on-one work, I do some facilitating work. So there's maybe 4 little farmer groups that I'm like the mom. I'm the facilitator. I hold the meeting. We all meet on Zoom. I keep us going. What's the topic? Blah, blah, blah. And then I do some events. I think we're going to talk a little bit today about the mastermind event. So it's a really lovely suite of activities that get to be under my business.
Yes, I could use that because I don't love QuickBooks yet. But yeah, actually, I did want to ask you, I know one of the things you've offered the last few winters is a mastermind. And I noticed that you're doing 2 masterminds this year, one for veg growers and one for flower growers, which is exciting because those are the 2 pillars of market farming and Growing for Market magazine.
Yes.
So what the heck is a mastermind anyway?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I got that word by doing some, personal education in performance, finding a coach and someone to inspire me about personal performance, productivity. And that's the first place where I heard the word mastermind. And, it's not my favorite word, but it existed before me. The idea is that especially after kind of that first 5 years of startup, when either you're going to sink or swim, likely, after you haven't sunk and you're swimming, the people that are going to best be able to help you improve your business are your peers. Peer learning, especially in an entrepreneurial space, is proven to be kind of the most effective way to keep getting better at your business. So this isn't to knock the role of a conference, which is you getting yourself or listening to podcasts or watching YouTube. Like there's always experts, but there's something. So what happens in a mastermind is I am the gatekeeper, meaning I make sure we have sort of a similar enough set of growers that they will be really helpful to each other. Like, so I have a floor, like you have to be grossing at least 150,000 and you need to be over the 5-year sink or swim period. Otherwise, your issues are just not the same as somebody who's farther down the pike in a bigger size. So I curate who's going to be in the room, and then we actually get together in a room at a retreat center. It's 2 or 3 nights, all your meals, and it's just super immersive, intensive, facilitated conversations. So I'm the facilitator, and I have a co-facilitator at each one of these events this year. And whoever is in the group, I elicit from them before we meet, what are your burning topics? What do you need help with? And so then we actually, as a group, before we get there, we rank. Everybody gets to vote on what topics are the most important to them. And so then that's how, when we first get together, we decide how much time are we going to spend in each of these subject areas. And we get to change our mind in the middle. If we just get so excited about one particular thing, we can vote. Hey, are we going to keep on this? Or do we need to stop and move on to market channel, whatever it is? So I don't determine the schedule, the topics, the group determines the topics. And so the whole setup is very unusual, and people are like, I don't understand what's going to happen. I'm like, I don't know. It's not prescribed what's going to happen.
You get to set it based on what works for your farm.
Right. So what's so cool is to watch people, to create a condition under which people can connect with each other. That's the part that makes mama's heart feel big and good, is to watch relationships forming, to see how this person had an answer and an inspiration for the other grower. And then somebody else steps in and says this thing and people go, whoa, great idea. It's such a special thing. It's a big deal for people because it takes time and money. So it's resource heavy. But the impact is bigger than any other thing I've seen besides, significant one-on-one consulting. And it's just so much fun to then have the evenings together, the mornings together, take a walk together in whatever subsets form. So that's a long story, and as you can hear, I love doing these. So this year, instead of only doing one, I'm doing 2 masterminds, one for flowers, and my co-facilitator is Lenny Larkin from the West Coast. So that's cool that she's obviously a very important character in cut flowers in the United States. And she's especially got a lot of folks that know who she is in the West Coast.
And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free. Today's episode of the Growing for Market podcast is brought to you by BCS America. On our farm, we've had our BCS 2-wheel tractor for over a decade, and with no belts to slip, its all-gear-driven construction is still going strong. Though we originally got it for rototilling, we kept it even when we went mostly no-till because it can do so many other things around the farm. From snow blowing, to making raised beds with the rotary plow, to chipping wood, it can do just about anything you might need on a farm with the right attachment. Need to shred a cover crop? A BCS flail mower will make quick work of even the most vigorous cover crop and chop it up so it breaks down quickly. Want to stir in compost or amendments without inverting soil layers? A power harrow turns your BCS into a precise tilthing machine with depth control so you don't mix deeper than you want to. With so many attachments to choose from, it truly is the Swiss Army knife of farm implements. It's why, instead of saying 2-wheel tractor, so many people just say BCS. Tractors and attachments are on sale through the end of the year. Visit bcsamerica.com to find sale pricing and your nearest dealer. A well-built high tunnel is one of the smartest investments a small farm can make. It protects your crops, extends your season, and keeps income rolling in even through winter. Nifty Hoops builds complete Gothic high tunnels that are easy to install and built to last. Their easy, bolt together construction makes setup straightforward and efficient, whether it's a small backyard hoop house or a dozen large production scale high tunnels. Especially through their community build option, where professional builders work alongside your crew, family, or neighbors to build each structure, usually in a single day. Most growers go with Nifty's full setup: steel framed end walls, roll up sides, baseboards, double plastic with inflation, automated vents, and real doors, all priced to make the best choice the easy one. Nifty is a small crew out of Michigan using U.S. steel and working hands on with growers across the country. They'll help evaluate your site, handle NRCS paperwork, and if they're building with you, they'll even float your cost share until after the build. Visit niftyhoops.com to learn more. Farm more seasons. Grow more food. Nifty Hoops. Renewal season is here, and the work you put in now is what brings members back next year. Melanie from Shake Fork Community Farm, who you may remember as a guest on this podcast, brought in $40,000 in renewals in just 2 weeks. Now she's sharing her exact strategy in a free live workshop and downloadable playbook from Farmhand. Get the playbook and watch on demand at farmhand.partners/GFM. That's farmhand.partners/GFM. And now back to the show. Yes, Lenny is awesome. I want to take a minute and point out she's been on this podcast. Listeners may know her. She also wrote the book Flower Farming for Profit, which we sell it through GFM, but because I think a lot of it, I mean, it was such a timely book because I think we're seeing a lot of flower farms get started right now, which I think is amazing when you consider how much of the flowers are imported to this country. But then you need that business advice, so it's not just a flash in the pan. To sustain your business, stay in business, you need to know how to make a profit on flowers. So I'm so glad that you're working with Lenny and that her book is out there. So yeah, Lenny's great.
We make a great team because I can get into the weeds with some of the bigger financial questions, or even if we get in the weeds with QuickBooks. She's also very good at crop costing and market channel, choosing how you're going to sell. And then, of course, I have production stuff. She's got production stuff. And then everybody in the room's got production stuff, right? And it may even turn into what variety of aster is the one that we just have to try. Well, I don't have anything. I don't grow asters. So then at that moment, I'm just, like I said, the mom. I'm just the facilitator, making sure that everybody has a chance to participate and, to keep the ball rolling and keep us from going off into the sunset on asters, let's just say. That's the flower mastermind. And that's going to be in Oregon this year outside of Portland, which is super exciting because I don't know anything about it. And then the vegetable growers mastermind, this will be the 5th time that I've run this program. And my co-host, my co-facilitator is a farmer out of Wisconsin named Robin Calvey. And her farm is called Park Ridge Organics. She's got 20-ish years into running her own successful organic vegetable farm. And she and I have worked together. I met her through doing a mastermind. Never knew who she was in the world. She came to one of my masterminds, and that was number 3. And that year was the juiciest cohesion of a cohort. We still meet on Zoom 3 years later every month. That's how much these people bonded. And a bunch of them have been to each other's farms. They have their own little subgroups. Like there's a little group of people that meet just about high tunnel tomato fertility. I mean, so all kinds of cool things happen. So anyway, that's how I met Robin. And I just felt like she could make it even better if I had another really smart farmer kind of in the facilitator role. And so that's happening also in December, and it's going to be in Maryland, just near where I live here outside of DC.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, those are some great opportunities. I think, the most innovative people in farming are farmers. So that's great that you're facilitating that. Are there any trends that you're seeing across the clients you're working with? I figure one of the real values of working with someone like yourself who talks with a lot of growers is that you can tell us if things we're seeing on our own farms are trends or just happening on our own individual farms. So what's going on with the people you're talking with?
Yeah. I think that's something that I do, a value that I get to bring to the table is like, well, here's what I'm hearing in the world. And I would say with have a little caveat on the side that sometimes maybe people that are super successful are not talking to me. They're not looking for help, or they already have help somewhere else in terms of consulting, advising, whatever. But anyway, what comes out of these masterminds are several hot topics, but really, I would say across our industry of market farming, whether it's flowers, herbs, or vegetables, economic stuff is tough right now. The conditions that we find ourselves in post pandemic, now deep into tariff, who knows what, is that input costs are significantly higher and rising still. And labor prices, the cost of labor is significantly higher than it was 5 years ago. And while prices for our products likely have not risen at the same pace. And that means there's a deficit of money coming in. So farmers are feeling really squeezed by those both ends. Like, I can't raise my prices anymore. My customers are going to freak or leave me. And I got to pay my people really well because I value them so much and it's really expensive to live. So I see farmers really struggling in that, trying to balance the squeeze that's coming from both sides.
Yeah, it's a tough farm business environment right now.
Yeah, I agree. And then as you and I chatted before we got started, and then comes climate weirding. And then you just get swept, your feet swept out from under you by crazy rain, crazy drought, weird temperature fluctuations, all that stuff. And so it's just, I feel like in some ways there's some parts of farming that are easier than ever. Like, right, there was no such thing as grants when I farmed. Like, there were no grants. You didn't get free high tunnels, and you didn't get just money from the government to do good practices beyond. Anyway, so some things are easier. The internet certainly makes things easier. I farmed without a telephone on my hip for most of my career. But these conditions, I think, are really, really tough on folks economically. So usually in the mastermind, we're going to talk about both sides of that equation. We're going to talk about pricing. At some point, likely we're going to talk about pricing. At some point, we're going to talk some about input costs, but you can't do anything about it, really. So, but we definitely spend a significant amount of time on labor. So that's why it's important, again, when I'm curating who's going to be in the room, everybody's got to be employing people, because that's going to be a place where we're going to spend a significant amount of time. And it's a very hot topic. That's probably the hottest topic of all, labor.
Yeah, I'll bet. Actually, what you just said reminded me a little bit. I went to a greenhouse conference a few years back, and I went to an interesting presentation where they showed how the price of greenhouse tomatoes in particular has been pretty flat for a long time. Like, I forget exactly what the time frame, but they were looking at the commercial pricing of tomatoes over decades and showing how the price was pretty flat, and that production had actually been going up gradually over time, showing that really the only way that growers were making a profit or making any more money was by producing a little bit more, because the prices were basically the same. And direct market farmers might have a little bit more flexibility to raise prices at individual farmers markets or CSAs, but It's more or less the same thing. Like, I don't think, like you said, the price of everything else is going up, but the price of what farmers are selling has not really come up that much.
And so that, I like you sort of drawing a circle around that and making it really clear. I think what it brings up, here's what I experience happening as a listener and observer, is farmers, we know now what the conditions are, but when they come to me, what they actually complain about is labor. They're not complaining about the price of potting soil or the price of propane. They complain about labor. And I end up having to be let's say, rigorous around saying, hey, you're not allowed to just pin your economic woes on your people and whether they're fast or not. That's not fair. Yes, labor's an issue, and so is this, and so is pricing. So that's one of my roles in the world, is to defend workers from grumpy bosses. Okay. Because somebody's been my grumpy boss before, for sure. But I think what it brings to the fore is where you just were, which is yield. Like, people want to get cranky about these things, but where is their leverage to actually deal with the situation that we're in? The leverage point is you got to be even better grower. No more big mistakes. Stop growing stupid shit that doesn't make any money. Stop growing too much of something and leaving yield in the field, right? So I try to empower growers to take the reins. Yeah, let's stop complaining and let's do some stuff. Let's figure some stuff out. What crops can you stop growing because we just know instantly they're losers? And how can we improve your yields on the crops that are in the running as a profitable, smart crop that you can sell well in your environment? So yield, it's like old school corn and soybean, but that's one place we still have leverage, is to do better with efficiency of movement and efficiency of production operations, right? Less weeding means more profit, etc.
Okay, so for you, does that look like doing the actual profitability on crops and eliminating them and eliminating the ones that aren't profitable, which sounds really obvious, but I think we all know a lot of people probably haven't done that.
Right. That's exactly what I mean. And some growers are kind of curious enough and I don't know, they're kind of ready. They're like, okay, all right, I can get really specific about this. Let's study this crop and find out. And what can happen. So I'm sort of their tour guide on working on a spreadsheet that at first looks unhappy and scary, and it's actually not a big deal. And I just kind of hold their hand through it. We get to the bottom of the sheet, but then you get to decide, how close am I? Is this nowhere near making a profit? And we don't even need to talk about it anymore. And most growers have a very good gut feeling. They know who the losers are, the really big losers. And there's something in them that is not letting them stop because they don't want to disappoint their customers. So we deal with that. That's a therapy thing. But for anything that's somewhere in the realm of break even or profitable, now we get to see, well, what can we change? What would happen if we change the price by 10 cents a pound? Are we making a profit? What would happen if we change the yield by this many pounds per bed? Now are we profitable? And so having that little spreadsheet gives you a very usable, visible tool to ask these little questions. Well, what if? And then at the bottom of this tool, it says, if I were to mechanize some piece of this crop production, like an undercutter or a full-on root digger or a different kind of barrel washer or whatever, you name it, we actually can run through how much is this tool going to help me save time, which is one of your biggest ingredients. Will it make us be able to grow that crop more competitively? So this is fairly rigorous and, it's in the weeds, but these are weeds that are really good to get into. And I love doing this work.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the things that you said sound really obvious. But at the same time, it sounds obvious to say, oh, just figure out the profitability on your crops and eliminate the unprofitable ones. But I think we all know that, especially during the season, people aren't doing that during the season and may never have. May have picked their crop assortment based on what they like to grow, what they think their customer base wants, and all that kind of stuff. And I can see how the value in having someone to push you to say, go figure out what's profitable. And especially with, like you were talking about mechanization, because a lot of the tools that people would buy to mechanize are pretty expensive. They sound expensive until you look at
Labor
how much
cost.
labor they're going to replace. Because I know I think most farms, labor is got to be one of the top two costs, right? So it can be intimidating to be like, oh, I'm going to spend $10,000 on something to mechanize this process. But then when you think about how many hours you're paying for to do it by hand, that's when you realize, like, oh, that actually might make sense.
Yep.
So
Yep. So those are really fun projects. And I do crop costing. I've done a number of webinars in the universe. So there's some stuff out there on the web that will show you how this tool that I use works. At the webinars, I'm always working with a grower. Like, we've already worked. It's not me just talking about slides. It's like me and a grower, and we go through the crops that they've identified they're interested in. Anyway, it's super nerdy, but that's what happens when markets get squeezy, is like it squeezes out people that aren't as good. Let's just, right? I mean, that's one of the better parts of the way capitalism is supposed to work, is like, oh, if you're not very good at your business, you're not going to do well. So this is a really squeezy time. And I think for people to be able to keep up, they got to get sharper. Let's put it that way. In whatever way that means. Sharper pencil, sharper knives, sharper weeding tools, whatever it is.
yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense, because I think farming is a different business from a lot of businesses, because a lot of people start based on passion, or or lifestyle, and they may just grow, have just like, they may not have ever done that analysis of profitability on the crops. But it's one of those things, if you want to stay in business, you probably got to do it. So I'm glad you're pushing people to do that.
Yeah, and it's fun and effective to have somebody to do it with. If you've ever worked on your own spreadsheets, at some point you're like, I don't even know what's happening anymore. I need somebody else's set of eyes to question all the assumptions. Like, oh, why did you put that number there? Oh, well, actually, now that I think about it, it's a really nicely done in pairs. And I don't have to be the person you do it with. I'll train you how to do it, and then y'all go on ahead. I don't have to be engaged in the whole thing. I just like to teach it and say, go run, do it.
Yeah, well, I have tried to do that with my own business, and I can see the point of working with somebody, because I think we're so close to our own businesses. What is it? We can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
It can be really hard to have any perspective on your own business.
Yep.
And there can be some really obvious stuff that somebody else looking at your business is like, oh, here's the problem.
Yeah. And that, not to toot my own horn, I'm tooting lots of people's horn. Exactly that perspective. So sometimes my whole job in this, where I am now, is to listen and then say, well, what about this? And that's it. Like, something that's totally obvious to me, because I'm not in the thick of it. I'm not bogged down with the details. And so again, it doesn't have to be me. It's just somebody who isn't you. You need to talk to somebody who isn't you to get a fresh perspective. And on the other, sort of similarly, I'm a huge encourager of getting off your farm and getting onto somebody else's farm. Get thee in front of someone else's business. Any field day, it doesn't even matter what they're talking about. Who cares? Get your butt onto that farm and look around. You are going to see something that's going to go, what is that? I mean, it could be something tiny, like how do they tie off the ends of their drip tape? It could be, who knows what it's going to be, but you're not ever going to see it if you don't get your ass over there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, though, because farming can be very isolating. We spend so much, a lot of us spend so much time by ourselves or with a couple other people on our farms. Can almost, like, the world can kind of close in on you. So I think that's really valuable to just, like, get out and see other things, see how how farmers are doing it.
Yep.
That's why Lynn started Growing for Market magazine, right? Like, that's why our articles are written by farmers, because there's other people out there that are experiencing the same challenges as you are, that are figuring stuff out. So we're just trying to connect all these isolated people, because there really aren't that many farmers anymore. So
yeah, and that's why the mastermind is great too, and that's why I think my services are especially helpful for farmers who are farming solo, meaning they're not farming with a life partner or any kind of partner. It's like they just need somebody to talk it out with. I don't even have to have an answer, but the act of them describing something, their dilemma, then they're like, oh yeah, I know what to do now. Right? It's just that act of processing outside of your swirling head, can the answer sort of comes to the fore.
Yeah.
Again, doesn't have to be me. It's anybody.
It's therapy for farmers. You're the therapist, right? Because I mean, I feel like isn't that a lot of the value of therapy is just like
Yes.
saying things out loud when you're like, oh, it makes you realize stuff. So
Yep.
That makes a lot of sense.
Farm therapy, absolutely. And people may freak out about that word. I'm a huge therapy proponent, so it makes me happy.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I get your point that before labor seems like a perennial problem, figure out the profitability of your crops. Like make sure your crop is profitable before you're paying anybody out to go out and pick it. But it does seem like finding enough workers, and especially good workers, is a perennial problem on farms. Do you have any advice for growers there? Once they've run their profitability, decided everything they're growing has at least the potential to be profitable, any hints on labor?
Yeah, labor is a big one. Again, I think I farmed in the olden days, back when we could pay people $7 an hour and give them a hut to live in. But it was a 3-month job. I mean, market farming was so different 30 years ago. We didn't wrap around the season. Are you insane? Winter. Have you heard of winter? We're taking it off, right? So what I'm seeing is, based on that now 12-month growing cycle or selling cycle, let's put it that way, 12 months of selling, now people, they need full year-round help. Well, that's not the college kid scene anymore, or even the college dropout anymore. This is now trying to make an actual real job for an actual real grown-up. And the grown-up has to be able to live in your community somehow. So if you want to have regular grown-up people who live somewhere in your area, you're going to have to pay them really good. And they might need some benefits, right? Maybe they would like to have a house and children too. So we're really stressed at being able to create full-time permanent jobs that someone can actually live on. So that's what some growers are trying to do, and it is hard because the numbers are big. So that's one angle of approach, and it works in some places, especially, I would say, places that are really way out in the middle of nowhere, where there's not a lot of jobs to be had. And so all the costs of living and the wages are lower than they would be if you're, outside of a metropolitan area. So that model is working for some folks. I would say part of my coaching at this point, I never thought it would be, is to say, have you thought of H-2A workers? And I never had any, so I don't have any personal firsthand experience, but I have secondhand experience through growers that I work with. And I would say 100% of the cases of farmers that have adopted H-2A are happy. They're not just happy, they're thrilled out of their minds. They are in awe. They're basically in awe of having a happy, incredibly productive and game set of folks. And they are really enjoying. It's not just like, oh, they work so good and that's all. They actually are really enjoying these relationships and enjoying trying to learn a different language. Lots of growers I know are going to Mexico in the winter to meet the families and go to the beach with the folks that they farm with in the summertime. So it used to really turn me off to even think about H-2A stuff. And it seemed, super fraught with ethical dilemmas. And from where I'm sitting now, everybody is real happy. Now, am I asking the H-2A workers, are they happy? No, I have not. Are they coming back year after year willingly? Yes, they are. So I'm assuming that means that it's going well for them as well. So that's another avenue of approach.
Oh, I just want to say for people who aren't familiar with H2A that it's also called the guest worker program, which is where farmers, there's a couple different ones. There's one for landscape industry, there's one for agriculture, and the agricultural one, I want to say it's like 9 months at a time. The idea being that agriculture is seasonal. You can't have people like on your farm for a year and just renew them. But the idea is there's a list of countries that if people want to work on farms in the US, you can recruit people from outside of the country. And you have to prove that you've tried to hire in your community. I know more about it because we've had a few articles in Growing for Market. In fact, there's one written by Rebecca Kutzer Rice, who's a flower farmer in New Jersey and one of our other podcast hosts. So she's written an article within the year that's very timely and good about this. And we've also had a few articles in the past. So if people want to know more about H2A, they can check the Growing for Market archives. But it does seem like a good program because labor is always a shortage, and there are people who would love to probably work on your farm, and there are protections built into the H2A program about like what the housing has to be. There's certain minimums that the housing has to be.
Very
There's
humane.
minimums for payment, right? So there is, I mean, it's obviously designed to work for farmers to help them recruit when they can't find enough workers from their area. There's also protections in there from the workers. So things can always be abused, but the way the program is set up is it should be a win-win. And likewise, I think all the growers that I've talked about it who've actually done it had very positive things to say. And so it's a way to legally get somebody from another country who can work on your farm.
Yeah.
That's all.
Who's very happy to work on your farm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So those are some of the things. I think the only other model that's sort of like maybe for folks who are in a more expensive region, closer to an expensive city, housing's expensive, is, and this is maybe more in the flower world than the vegetable world, but basically having independent contractors who you pay a high price to, but they only come in, 15 to 25 hours a week. And they are in the gig economy, and you are one of the gigs that they have going. And they may have a restaurant job 10 or 15 hours a week, and they may have their own art project that they're doing 10 to 15. But I know several farms who have folks in that category who are extremely skillful. So you're paying them whatever it is, 20, 22, 24, but they show up, they do the thing, and they get out of there. And there's no drama. It's just like really straightforward. And that can work also. It's complicated to have lots of part-timers, but I see it working for some folks.
Yeah, I mean, it's better than having nobody to do the job. And that's interesting because that's not a model that I've heard a whole lot about. So you mean like people are coming in for 15 or 20 hours a week to like harvest a certain crop they're good at, or like make bouquets for 15 or 20 hours a week? Because yeah, some of those things, like not everybody is a great bouquet maker. It's the kind of thing, it helps to have you can train somebody, but it helps to have somebody with some experience who can just, hit the ground running and do that. So, okay, well, that's a cool idea.
Yeah. So that's the labor piece. It is definitely fraught. I mean, labor's always what there is to talk about because it's the single biggest expense, and there's the most heart aspect, right? They're folks. These are humans, and they have their foibles, and they have their upsets, and they have their joys. And it's not just an economic arrangement. It's a psychological, emotional arrangement. And so there's a lot going on in the area of labor. Yeah.
Yes, always. There might even be more going on right now than usual. But yeah, it seems like labor is just a perennial issue on farms.
Yep. And it's not getting better yet. No.
All right. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you about was scaling down as opposed to scaling up, because like what you were saying about doing your crop, figuring out how profitable your crops are, made me think about how I think the general thought in most businesses, including farming, is like, oh, to make more money or become more profitable, we have to get bigger. But sometimes I think people can actually stay the same size and just be more efficient to be more profitable. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's hard to really scale down very successfully. There are a few cases that I can think of where and this would be in a sort of fairly mechanized vegetable market farming vegetable situation where like they already bought all the stuff. They have a really like pretty nice fleet of equipment. And then when they downsize, it's like they have access to toys that are above their grade because they already bought them back when they were big. And now it's like, oh, everything is so easy because we have all the great toys. Whereas if you started at that scale, you'd be like, you can't afford to have that, all those equipment. So those folks are having a good time, I think. But I'm more interested in what you propose, which is, can we just keep getting better and more efficient? And theoretically, our ground is better, right? Because we've been improving it for 20 years now. And we're really good at selling stuff and we're really good at all kinds of things. Can we plant less and have the same net? Yes, I think that is possible. Yeah, and it really depends on what your economic goals are. You know, what your needs are. What do you need financially to get out of this project?
Yeah. Okay. Basically, don't be limited by thinking that you have to grow
Right.
to grow the income or be more profitable.
Right. I mean, unless your real concern is, I'd say two concerns that people come to me where scaling up is definitely where we're going to go. One is growers are like, I need help holding all of the whole ship up, floating. Like there's too many things in my head. I can't keep it all organized. I really need a significant right-hand person. And it's like, okay, well, a significant right-hand person is going to need 50 grand and maybe a house. How can we build that into the budget and have it work? Well, we're going to have to grow some more stuff, right? Or another scenario would be the work is too hard on my body and I need to bend over less, or I need more mechanization in order to make the ergonomics easier. Again, if we're going to substitute capital for labor, probably we're going to have to scale some. So those are some situations where growing is bigger, is like kind of baked in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. To reach the scale that the mechanization pays off, that might be a good way to make the decision of like, if you need to increase scale to make that mechanization work, that would be an obvious reason to scale up. Or if you could think you can just be more efficient.
Yeah. And, you know, that scaling up and that mechanization could be matched with, I'm actually going to grow less, like moving out of retail and into more wholesale channels, right? I'm tired of trying to please every homeowner, every mom, cook. I just want to grow the shit out of these 12 vegetables and I'm going to get the right equipment and it's going to be easy. You know, that is a viable path for some folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of where we're at when we stopped doing a farmer's market stand, is because when we started out in farming, we were like, we're never wholesaling. Why would we want to sell a bunch of stuff for a low price? And then after doing farmers markets for I don't know how many years, we were kind of like the opposite. You know, we were sick of getting, you know, because up here in Maine, most years it rains a lot in the summertime. And so we were kind of sick of like going to the farmers market on our biggest day of the year and then it thunderstorms and nobody comes, or, you know, like our mentality had flipped. We started to see how nice it could be just to like ship off a pallet of tomatoes or whatever. So
Yep.
that makes sense.
Yep. And I think there's a trend that I see that I worry. I'm a worrier. I have an anxiety, you know, I'm a worrier. And so I see things sometimes happening. I think, oh, I don't know how that's going to work out. And the trend that I'm talking about is the farm store trend. Everybody wants to have a farm store. And they all start out really like low key. It's just going to be a little shed, no big deal. And then all of a sudden now I'm getting a grant. And now I'm putting up a $100,000 building or $200,000 building. Oh, and while we're at it, I'm going to have a bigger walk-in. And while we're at it, we're going to make salads and sell them on the side. And it's like, wow! And all of a sudden, people are like starting to become a grocery store. Well, you know what the margin is at a grocery store? It's like 1%. And people are going to, I'm worried that we're going to find out the hard way, like, oh, carrying all this inventory, actually, all my profit, all my cash is tied up on all this shelf stable stuff and on meat in the freezer and on cheese in their fridge. And all of a sudden we're like, oh yeah, a grocery store is a hard way to make a living. It's like you're going from a hard way to make a living to a harder way, right? There's a reason why there's not a lot of grocery store owners anymore, because it's really tough business. So I worry about the farm stand thing. For some people, obviously it's working. Just tread carefully. That's all Mama would say.
So like maybe stick to the stuff that you produce, because I know we've had some articles in the magazine about tips for running a farm stand, and a lot of those focus on the things that you're actually growing and producing on your own farm.
Yep.
So maybe that's why.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I assume that in talking to growers across the country, almost everyone is experiencing more unpredictable, wilder weather, in addition to just getting warmer. Like I realized, like, I don't know, I think 10 years ago, I thought like, oh, global warming, climate change, like, okay, things will be sort of like they are now, but warmer. And what I've realized, right, because we're all stuck in our own mentality. It's hard to imagine things we haven't experienced yet until we've experienced them. And now I've realized that it's just destabilizing the weather. We went, I think season before last, we had the wettest season that it's ever been up here in Maine. Just rained all summer long. And then this year it's been the driest season. So I think that's probably accurate to say we've had the driest season since I've been up here, separated from the wettest season since I've been up here, separated by 1 year. So is there anything actionable you have for people about dealing with more unpredictable extreme weather? I mean, because I'm a greenhouse guy, I think of like, build a greenhouse, you can control the weather. But I realize, that's something that comes to mind, but that's also not everybody wants to do that.
Yeah, I think that is certainly a viable option, is to try to buffer the temperature, but it also brings with it a whole other vulnerability, which is wind. And if wind is the thing that's going to come and take down $200,000 worth of structures, that's going to kind of suck. So yeah, it's definitely an idea. I would go where my mind goes is kind of even like a more fundamental or basic approach. And so I've jotted down a couple of things I want to think through or mention. So for sure, we're always got to keep soil health in the conversation. So if the Mississippi River is going to flood, it doesn't matter how much organic matter you have, right? So there's nothing we can do to prepare for a tornado. There's nothing we can do to prepare for a river taking all your stuff away. Okay, so I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about really crazy weather. So soil capacity to both hold water and to drain, right, which is the whole point about having increasing organic matters in our soil, that comes to play in the tighter margins. Like it's a little wetter, it's a little drier. Extremes are extremes, but it could give us some buffer in sort of those middle situations. I think of, and this is a super unpopular thing to say, and that's one of my best jobs in the world, is to say stuff people hate. This is the opposite of being a lean farmer. I believe in the face of climate variability, having plenty of pieces of equipment and labor available allows you to take the opportunity for doing certain kinds of farm work. The window of opportunity is getting smaller, right? In between rains, I only have 36 hours before it's going to rain again to get this whole field turned around and planted, right? And so if all you have is one tractor to do any of your work, or one walk behind, or one whatever, and you only have one person and they only come on Tuesday, like, well, Tuesday wasn't the day. The dry day was Thursday. So I believe in a certain amount of redundancy of equipment and labor resource. Not a popular thing to say, and not cheap either, right? Not cheap either. Of course, I don't have to say much about diversity. We've been browbeaten as a culture of market gardeners, market farmers to basically over diversify. So I rarely have to say this, but there is obviously one of the great values of having a diversified both market channels and crop mix is if it's a really dry year, these crops are going to be okay. And on really wet years, there's a few crops that are going to be okay. I'm a big believer in irrigation and having adequate water resource to get you through the drought years. Having too much water is always harder to deal with. So besides raising your beds and having managing water flow, talk to your NRCS folks about that. And then I would mention coming at this from a financial resilience standpoint, and that might mean really listening to those financial advisors who tell us you really should have 4 to 6 months of cash in the bank to cover payroll in case the hits the fan, right? So saving for a rainy day fund. So I bring that up with growers all the time, and it does not sell well. Like people will say, oh, I had a really good year. What new equipment can I buy? I'm like, how about you don't buy it? How about you pay taxes on it and put it in a faraway savings investment vehicle, but you have it? A different idea, but in that department of kind of looking at this from a number crunchy angle is whole farm insurance. So there are insurance products out there for farmers to protect us against the bigger extremes, the complete and utter USDA defined drought and the river coming and taking all your stuff. The USDA came up with whole farm insurance specifically for people like us in mind. So instead of having to say each crop and your 5-year yield record and how much you sold it for, you're insuring how much gross sales you have, no matter what the crop is. It's a whole different product. And I encourage people to consider it, right? Insurance is insurance. It's in case I need it. Well, it's starting to look a little bit more like we might need it. So that seems like a good time to maybe shop for some insurance.
Yeah.
So there's a few funny things to say.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say that does, I mean, especially if people aren't aware of that whole farm insurance, that does sound like a good idea. It's probably smart to have.
Yeah. And that would deal with wind, hurricanes, structures getting, always be checking with your actual regular farmbrella policy. Are your high tunnels covered or not?
Mm.
If it doesn't explicitly lay them out exactly, they're not covered, dude. And I don't want you to find out the hard way.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's a good point to make, is just as we are experiencing weirder, wilder weather, check that maybe this December. Look, at what your farm insurance policy is, because you probably don't think a whole lot about it.
Right. You set it and forget it.
Yeah. Probably time to make sure everything valuable is on there. Okay. Well, so one of the things from my own farming past, we don't do this anymore, that I wanted to ask you about when I was thinking things under the category of things that I would like to ask Ellen about. So is loss leaders. And so in case people aren't familiar with the idea of a loss leader, it's like a product that is marginally or not profitable, but that brings somebody into your store, market stand, CSA or whatever. So they'll buy other things. And so, I heard the term for a lot of other retail places came into effect with us, because so we used to have chickens that we sold along with our produce, and the eggs were always marginally profitable. And my wife Annie and I always debated about whether they had value as loss leaders. Essentially, people loved the eggs. Would it get people in the market stand to buy other stuff that was more profitable? And I was just thinking the other day about how I don't even know if the concept of having loss leaders works for market farms. It was like we were having this whole debate about whether to do this thing. Then I realized the bigger question is, does the thing even work? And so, do you have an opinion on loss leaders? Because I hear like there's other things like, I don't know, like sweet corn or melons or things like that. Strawberries, yeah. There's a number. It doesn't have to be eggs. Like there's a number of crops that I hear people struggling with the profitability on, and that's kind of how the debate goes. It's like, oh, but people really like them. It's like maybe I'm breaking even on the sweet corn, but they'll buy a bag of lettuce and a bunch of carrots while they're in the stand getting the sweet corn.
Yep.
So, what do you think about that?
Yep. First of all, well, the short answer is I think in general it's a bad idea and it doesn't work. That's the shortest answer. The longer answer is, do you even know if any of your crops are profitable? And the answer is usually no. And so you're just, everything's a stab in the dark. Now we're back to crop costing. And eggs are all the things that we've just mentioned, that you've mentioned, are absolutely great examples to really drill down on. Are you making any money at all on eggs? After you've put your labor in and all the costs, are we at break even? If something's at break even and you don't hate the work, right? Like I hate chicken work. I don't like chickens. But I would deal with chickens if I was making a good profit. But eggs don't make a good profit. So if chickens are like part of your family's fun factor and your kids really love the chickens, okay, break even eggs, cool. I would start with where are you on the break even versus profitable versus losing money spectrum, and then consider some of the other factors. Are you short on labor? Well, what if they weren't messing around with washing those dumb eggs? Okay, or what if you don't like the work or whatever, and have that like push you towards keeping the crop or push you to like, yeah, this is silly. The other thing would be if you knew, like loss leaders are really important in grocery, right? And that's why they send out those regular grocery stores still have like a sale every week, with a flyer. But the whole produce section of any grocery store, the whole thing is a loss leader. They're getting you in there with produce because it's rotting every day and you have to come and get new produce. And they know they're not going to make money on that whole section, but they also know that when you shop the rest of the store, they're going to make 20%. So 0 averaged out with 20 gives you 10. That's cool. So what I'm leading you to is, what if the rest of these crops that you are hoping they get when they buy your stupid strawberries, what if you're not making very good money on those either? And now it's like, well, shoot. So it's really a question of what's really happening on your farm. Like, are you really profitable? And then it's like, oh, sure, I'm going to grow green beans for my CSA because my CSA is going really good. I'm really doing well financially. I'm going to grow those beans as a present. So that's not a loss leader, but it looks nice on the list and it's keeping your customers happy. So those are the really short answers and the long, more interesting answer. And all of this points to, I think, everything we've talked about, almost everything we've talked about so far, points to another thing that people come to me with, which is, I don't want to be a business owner. I just want to farm. Woo, that's a tricky one. But that's, like you said, people get into farming because they're passionate about growing something. They want to be outside. They love dirt. They love cows. They love dahlias. They love the sun and the rain and all that stuff, right? And that whole gestalt. But that doesn't mean, if I really like shoes, it doesn't mean I should have a shoe factory, right? You can love stuff and have it be a hobby. I love yarn and knitting. Am I going to try to make a living knitting sweaters? No, that's not going to work. So I'm a little bit of rough that way. Like, if you don't want to be in business, don't be in business. Go get hired by somebody else and have a beautiful garden. You know what I mean? So that one is tough, but it's very common for a grower at a certain age to be like, I don't want to run this whole business. Well, these conditions that we're talking about, this squeeze is going to encourage you to be like, yeah, maybe it's time to get a job. And that's cool. But I am a no shame in quitting farming kind of gal. Like, There is no shame. Just pick the thing that's going to make you happy. I want you to be happy. Whatever the answer is, let's go towards happiness.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point. I mean, the first question is, yeah, should you be farming? Because the other thing is, yeah, I mean, I would assume that most people in our audience are there because they're passionate about plants and growing things in the first place. But as you know, making something your profession can also sometimes be a quick way to hate it. And so it sounds like that's what you're doing, and what we're doing is trying to help people figure out, like, growing things is one thing, starting a business growing things known as a farm is a whole other thing.
Absolutely. And so that's where, I mean, most of everything else we've talked about is actually running a business.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing which of your things that you're selling are profitable.
Yeah.
Knowing how many hours something is going to take, and running your pencil. Checking out insurance, keeping good books. None of these things is putting seeds in soil, but they're integral to a successful farm business. And if you don't want to be in business, cool. Most people don't want to be in business. They want to go to their job, do their thing, and come home and play with their kids and not worry about it. So do that. That's cool. I'm open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a whole other thing when you turn it into a business. And, there's so many great ways to support farmers other than being a farmer. I think it's very valid to say, if somebody has a passion for this kind of stuff, but doesn't have a passion for a business, because yes, as a small business person, it's nerve-wracking. You got to make it happen. If you don't go out and keep your business going, it's not going to run itself. So it's worth saying that if people have the passion for it, but just be honest about it, it's a lot to both grow a lot of stuff and then have to keep a business running based around it. There's other ways that people could work in farm adjacent things, still strengthen the market farming environment without having to be the person that the business lives or dies with. So,
and then the other piece, just that now all of a sudden is obvious, is like, I know several big size operations that need a right-hand grower, where the person is the owner, wants to just do the business side. At this point, they're like, I want to do the marketing, I want to do the sales, I want to do the legal stuff, I want to figure out the insurance, but I need somebody to grow the crops and run the crew. Oh man, there's jobs out there, and they're starting to have, it's not like being a banker, but there's some reasonable salaries attached, 70 to 100K. So, but then you got to move. You're going to have to move to where that farm is. So those opportunities exist, absolutely. And some of them are very good opportunities.
Yeah.
Where you don't have to worry about selling anything. That's not your problem. Just grow it. Somebody else's problem is to turn it into money. Like, that's a perfect job for a super nerd who's a super, farm nerd who just wants to geek out on equipment and fertility, Yeah, and varieties.
Yeah, it's a very different thing to work on a farm versus running a farm. And I think a lot of people want that discretion, or to be able to take the farm in the direction they want, but it also, with great discretion comes great responsibility, And so, yeah, that plays into we've been talking so much about labor. It's like, you could go join, let's say if you're, let's say apprenticed for somebody for a few years, realize you love it, but maybe realize you don't need to be the one running the business. Go work on someone else's farm.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So there's one thing that we got into a little bit before, which is fertility. I wanted to ask, because I know it's something you've studied a lot. You've had many chances to implement it on your own farm. But do you have advice for growers on dialing in their fertility? And I want to put it in the context. We have a writer who's working on an article about fertility. And, we've had, this is not like the only one. The magazine will be 35 years old next year. Like, we've had other soil fertility articles, but some things, like our fertility is so important. It's worth covering multiple times. So we have this author who's working on an article about fertility, particularly about soil testing. Like, the whole idea is talking about, like, what's the best way to get, figure out what your soil needs. So she's done a bunch of interviews, and finally just put the article on pause because they were getting so many contradictory answers about what soil tests to do, how to manage fertility. Is that something that you get into with clients? And I realize like the value of working with you one-on-one is that they could ask you your questions specific to their own farm. But do you have anything like generally that you could tell us about your orientation towards fertility?
Yeah, I love that you're bringing this up because I think it doesn't get a lot of airtime in our sector.
Uh-huh.
One, how important it is to get fertility working well for you. And two, how tricky it can be to get that to happen and how people like the world doesn't agree on what your targets are, what products are better than others, all of that stuff. So it's controversial and it's sticky. So that was the very first thing that I offered when I hung my shingle was helping people with soil testing and then figuring out what does the test actually say. And then given what the test says and who you are and where you are and how much money you have and what your equipment is, we come up with a plan of what do you want to use at what rates. So there's the problem is nobody wants to pay money for that service. Like, well, 50 people want to pay, but it's not enough to make a living, and it's boring after a while. It's like, oh, this is a 1.5 hour, 2 hour gig. It's just not that much fun. So that's why I don't do it anymore with just a total stranger. It has to be for me in a suite of consulting where we're really looking at a bunch of stuff. And then it's like, yeah, we have to talk about fertility. So I still do it. So the best you can do is it's kind of like what kind of yoga? What's your style of yoga? Like there's some core elements of yoga, but like there's hatha, which is, vanilla. And then there's the kundalini, which is like chili pepper spicy. And then there's like, you know what I mean? Like which one appeals to you? And maybe you want to dive into it and do your own thing. I would say my advice from like a big high level would be don't get bogged down with shiny objects. Don't let the shiny objects that are on Instagram or whatever feed is coming across your consciousness to go super down a rabbit hole about, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I will because that's what I do. Like putting the eggshells in the 5-gallon bucket and rotting them. And like, oh, that's the thing my farm has been missing. It's like, likely, unless you've been in this game for 30 years, that is not the thing you've been missing. So what I want to say is don't start worrying about what flavor of frosting goes on the cake if you haven't figured out how to make the cake. Like, let's start with the basics. What's your organic matter level? Are you doing cover cropping? Do you have any boron? Like, the thing that happened for me that was so almost embarrassing to admit, but I'm going to admit it because other people need to be embarrassed too. Like I was so hardcore early in my career, like I'm not going to buy any stuff. I'm not buying any fertilizer. I'm going to grow it all myself. Because I'm just going to use cover crops. I'm just going to cover crop and cover crop. And it's like, just growing cover crops, this is against Elaine Ingham's teaching, so, shoot me, is not going to create the element boron. If boron isn't in your soil, it's not going to be in the cover crop. And then when you mix that cover crop back in, you did not create boron out of thin air. You got to have to go get some boron and put it on the field. And I was like, woo! How come I didn't get that before? Duh. So that's when I went heavy into compost. As you know, I wrote a whole article about it, which pissed off some people.
It's there in the archives if people want to read it.
Yeah. But then I realized, fertilizer. I could use fertilizer and not be a loser, not be hurting the earth, not be bad. And that's when I started my journey learning about fertilizer. And my teacher, my guru, is Gary Zimmer, who started Midwestern Bioag in the middle of the country in Wisconsin. And so that's the style in which I do fertility, is in the style of Gary Zimmer, right? You do yoga in the style of Iyengar. That's who you listen to. Like, you just got to pick, like, I'm picking this person and their worldview. That's the style in which I'm going to do fertility. That may sound like a crazy way to answer the question. So who's going to help you do it? Very few people are hanging a shingle saying, I'm going to help you figure out your fertility, because it's boring and you don't want to pay them. Right? And so you're left with either super nerding out on your own and reading some really good books, or you're going to go to a dealer. You're going to go to Seven Springs. You're going to go to whoever sells fertilizer in your neck of the woods, organic, OMRI listed fertilizers. And you're going to work with them. Just keep asking questions. And if you feel like they're not giving you enough time, offer to pay them and say, hey, Daniel Sweeney, he's a super smart guy, right, at Seven Springs. Can you hold my hand on this an extra hour? I'm willing to pay you $100 if you'll just hold my hand and help me follow this through to the very last. So I really get, why am I doing this? And when should I put out the fertility? In what form and in what amount? So that's my advice. And it's absolutely, this is one of those things, again, that just makes me crazy. It's like, oh, I want to have a farm, but I don't want to be in business. Okay, we call that a garden and it's a hobby. Okay, cool. People are like, oh, yeah, I want to be a farmer, but, I don't really want to deal with that fertility thing. Like, well, it's just too complicated. It's like, well, then what are you doing here? Like, this is a fundamental piece of the thing. Get into it or pay somebody to help you. Not doing it is not an option in this environment. Get out, do something else. So that's how I think about it.
And what about the approach of just getting a soil test and looking at the recommendations on the soil test? Because that's what we did for years. It might not be the most specialized recommendations, but you know what I mean? When you get a soil test,
it's in the neighborhood. Yeah.
There's it tells you what the range for all the nutrients that they're analyzing are. It'll tell you if you're high or low in the range that you want to be in. And there's some math there, figuring out how much to add. And you could always get better. You can probably pay somebody to get more specialized advice, but that would be, I would think that would be the baseline is, to get a soil test and try to do what your soil test says.
Yeah. And then you get into what lab are you going to go to based on, do they deal with organic systems at all? So that's when I would say, just asking Waypoint, they'll tell you what your values are and they'll tell you where you are in the ranges, but they are not, they don't have any advice about how to fix it. They don't speak our language. So if you're in the organic sustainable region, don't expect advice from people who speak in Roundup and 10-10-10. Right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So then you would go more to University of Maine, has a great soils lab, and they have really good recommendations, and they're the most expensive guys out there. They deserve it. Or you might go through Midwestern Bioag if you live in the middle of the country. They have consultants that'll work with you as part of the deal. Who's the guy in Vermont? North Country Organics. There's a really smart guy who's been in this business for 1 million years. He only speaks in organics. Work with those guys. Daniel Sweeney at Seven Springs. Get your test wherever you want from Waypoint, but work with someone who knows how to come up with a suite of answers that are appropriate for organics. Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, that seems like good advice. It sounds like you're saying fix your big problems, before you try to do everything with, say, compost and cover crops or something like that. Because we all love compost and cover crops, but like you said, there's certain nutrients that a cover crop can't make, and so you got to deal with the underlying problems before you can do that.
Well, I would say I want to nuance it just a little bit. And you're repeating back. I want to nuance it to say cover crops are not negotiable. in my worldview, we're always growing cover crops because it's not about creating boron. The reason I'm growing cover crops is to create biology, happy biology. You were talking about fertilizer. That's where the boron comes in. So soil health includes the chemistry piece. Where's the boron coming from? Do I have enough? And mostly people need potassium. Then there's the biological piece. Now we're talking about compost and cover crops and tillage. And then there's the physical piece. Again, compost, cover crops, tillage, root penetration, aeration, right? Tilth. So all those things have to get thought through. But if you want to talk about fertilizer, you better talk to the people who know how to talk about fertilizer. And you have to cover crop or something bad's going to happen. So, or you have to keep plants in the ground as many days as you can. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Living roots in the soil. All right. Well, yeah, that's good advice. I mean, that's funny. It reminds me, I had a farming friend that I worked with actually on the Virginia Tech farm for a while. And he had worked for years at a biodynamic CSA, was like deep into all this stuff. And then we were starting our first farm. The first time we started our farm, I don't know, 15 or 20 years ago in Pennsylvania. And I was like, hey, do you think like all those biodynamic preps would help us? Right? Because like everything's new. We're starting our farm. I'm trying to do everything the best way. And he was like, take a decade, fix all the big problems. And then when you fix all the big problems, like you said, the icing on the cake, but like basically like the little things aren't gonna make a difference until you've taken care of the big things. So yeah. That sounds like really good advice to me.
Yeah. Get the pH right. Make sure you have plenty of phosphorus cycling. Yeah. Do the big stuff, make your cake. And then in 5 to 10 years, figure out what kind of icing you want. Absolutely. Well said.
Okay. Well, we're almost at the end of the list of questions that I had for you. I'll give you a chance to, maybe we've glossed over something, but I want to ask you really quickly. So I'm working on a project. I'm just curious to get your take on it. So I realize I've been doing growing for market for a decade now. I think this 2026 will be a decade of growing for market. And so what I was doing a decade ago was I was working for Johnny's Selected Seeds in the research department, running greenhouse trials on varieties, to decide which varieties of greenhouse vegetables we should carry in the catalog. It's a great job. It was very interesting. The only reason I left it was to take over growing for market. At the same time, I was working on a plan for a greenhouse project. So, and the working title was the Green Greenhouse, because I had some cooperators and collaborators when I worked at Johnny's who were incorporating like geothermal systems to offset heating, and let's just say like cutting edge technologies, mostly on using less fuel, using less energy and stuff like that. And so I had gotten fairly deep in the process as far as like I had gotten a quote on a structure. I had quoted out most of the components that were going to go in this greenhouse. My whole idea was that I wanted to build this greenhouse, run it as a commercial business, and share my numbers as far as like how long it took to pay back the geothermal system and stuff like that. Because not only is that I want people to become more efficient, but I think that's a really important thing. Most greenhouse businesses that I've talked to, energy is their second biggest cost behind labor, right? So you don't have to be a tree hugger to want to bring your gas bill down, right? Like everybody's going to want to do that. So I realize that banks don't want to lend money to technologies that aren't proven. And so on the one hand, I'd seen these technologies working in real working farms, and I wanted to do a project like that. And I also knew that people would probably have trouble getting loans for these things because they're considered new technology.
Yeah, unproven.
Yeah. So I shelved that project when I took over growing for market, because obviously, this has been keeping me pretty busy for the last decade.
Yeah.
But now we actually had a podcast guest on a few months back who was talking about how they started a nonprofit business. And it made me think that this project might be better as a nonprofit. as far as, maybe testing out unproven technologies in a greenhouse, maybe that's better as a nonprofit than risking your whole large sums of money, potential like repossession of your farmland and stuff like that if it doesn't work out. So,
Yeah.
in the part that would, I think, serve the community and make it a nonprofit is that I know from working in the industry that most big greenhouses have some area in their greenhouse dedicated to trialing, right? Trialing varieties, different spacings, different equipment, different techniques, and things like that. And they don't share that, right? Because it's proprietary. And I think, while smaller growers who are likely in our audience probably do some trialing, there's still they probably can't devote a lot of their area, right? If you don't have a very big greenhouse, there's not much you can sacrifice to, say, varieties or practices that might or might not be profitable. And so, I was thinking, I still have all the research that I did for this project a decade ago. I still have the idea, and now, so I'm planning on starting a nonprofit that's starting on January 1st, 2026. Also, because I realized one way to raise the money would be from people who want to see these kinds of projects happen. And the service to the community, or the reason it's nonprofit, is that we would run trials, is both varieties and spacings and all the different things, plus the heating system, and share all of our numbers. The idea is that we're a nonprofit because we
Right.
share everything. Yeah. And so,
Yeah.
so that's where I'm at with it, of trying to, in 2026, start the darn thing and then start essentially fundraising. Because, another thing is, a lot of the places that would give, a lot of the private places that would give money for this kind of thing, they want you to be a nonprofit, which is understandable. Most people don't want to like give grants to people who, for-profit businesses. So I guess that's my big picture. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts about that as I'm like creeping up on starting the actual company.
Yeah. I think it makes sense to have it be a nonprofit. So I'm following your narrative, and all of it makes sense until I wonder, well, first of all, hello, the government used to do this. It was called a land grant university, right? That was our research department for agriculture, was through USDA and states departments of agriculture. But so there's a part of me that wonders if having a partnership in some way with some other entity, I don't know what it would be, an educational or research entity, wouldn't make you a more powerful draw. Now, that may technically mess everything up because you want it to be in your backyard. But there's some beauty in detaching you personally from the project, knowing that it could live without you at some point. Right? So having it on land that is preserved, or there's guaranteed access for 20 more years, just thinking through that, that's my only feedback would be, could you do something with a university or existing research facility? Maybe it even makes sense could it be a public private, or could it be a partnership with Johnny's, or could it be, I'm just messing around. Lots of grants that do come out do seem to like the idea of people working with other people, a collaborative effort, whether it's a collaboration of growers or collaborating across sectors, right? Private, public, research. So, and of course, the reason, as you said, why those seed companies or whoever is not publishing their data is because it's so expensive. They don't feel they could give it away. And then they also don't think they could sell it. And so they're just like, it's just ours. So nobody's making money on research unless it's Bayer or Syngenta or whatever. And they're going to keep it a secret until they have that seed to sell you. So it's a tricky spot, but I appreciate your impulse of sort of ground swell, impulse to study something that you think would help the industry, the movement.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there isn't somebody, gosh, it seems like there would be somebody else to talk to about it. Like, could you do it on the grounds of the Maine Country Fair? Or, I don't know where anything is in Maine. It's all far away for me. But something that gives it a certain amount of stability and sort of cachet. And then, and they have their own fan base already, their own funders, their own stakeholders. And so you're just kind of more mighty.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking about.
Well, that's actually a really interesting idea that I had not thought about very much because, within 45 minutes of my farm, there's the Mofka farm, and there's also the Johnny's Research Farm is also within 45 minutes away. Fedco is also 45 minutes away. that is one of the cool things. Maine, we are very lucky up here in Maine. We are I've got ideas. This for another podcast. I've got ideas about why that is, but we are very lucky up here in Maine to be close to so many
great resources.
Yeah, we have really good resources. And really, I hadn't thought about that. You're right. One of those places might be a good collaborator. Yeah, because I think it's hard to do the trialing on a working farm and, give it enough space. Like heirloom tomatoes are a really good example. Like I know when we were growing tomatoes commercially, we were getting, I want to say, about half the yield off of heirloom tomatoes than we were off of, say, like greenhouse varieties. And so I'm not, probably if people have kept records, they have realized that. But then there's questions like, well, I need to grow heirlooms. What are the most productive heirlooms in a greenhouse? You know, I feel like being a farmer is almost like I don't know, we could use a sports analogy of, say, like, you could choose all different players each year, the players being your varieties, right? So it's like, how do you know? Like every year there's later and greater varieties in the seed catalog, right? How do you know whether the latest, greatest variety is better than what you've been growing with other, without doing a trial? And so, because I've worked in that space, I've done variety research. I've done greenhouse variety research. I guess it's, I love it, so, but I also see, that would be the value, is that all these little we would share everything so that all these little farms could look and be like, oh my gosh, like German Johnson is more productive than Brandywine or whatever. If I need a big pink heirloom, like I'll grow German Johnson, or, all those kinds of things. So, okay, well, cool. Thank you, Ellen. Yeah, I might actually be uniquely positioned, like I'm to leverage some of the relationships of people who are more or less in my own backyard who might want to collaborate on that. So that's a great feedback. I appreciate that.
Cool. Fun.
All right. Well, that's what I had for you, but I want to make sure and ask, is there anything else I should have asked or that you would like to say before we let you go?
I think that was a really lovely smorgasbord of things that I'm excited about, things that I have some information or insight about. I think we did great.
Okay. Yeah, I thought so too. I really enjoyed this interview, but I always want to make sure, if there's something I didn't ask, I always want to give people a chance to make sure they said what they need to say. So
yeah, thank you.
In that case, where can people find you online or social media or wherever you want people to look you up?
Yeah. So the place that has the most information is my website. It's Plant to Profit, and you'll have the link. And I have a love-hate relationship with social media. So I'm intermittently post interesting things on Instagram. And again, it's easy to find. Those are the main places.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Ellen. You've been very generous with your time. I appreciate it. And
loved it.
Come back again sometime. I know so much stuff. Come back on the pod sometime. Either I'll think of something that seems like up your alley. You let us know when there's some exciting thing and we could talk about it. So
absolutely. I appreciate being invited and having an opportunity to interact with your bigger influence. You've got I loved your magazine from forever. I talk about it everywhere I go. Growing for Market is the one publication that is made for us. So I hold it very dear. So it's really fun to play with an institution that I've respected so deeply over the years.
Oh, good. We try to be there for market farmers. So, all right. Well, thanks, Ellen. Good luck with the mastermind and everything else. And we'll talk to you again sometime soon.
All righty.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Growing for Market podcast. If you've been enjoying the show, please consider giving us a follow and a rating or a review. It really helps others find the podcast. For more tips and tricks from farmer to farmer, check out our magazine at growingformarket.com. Whether you're a commercial grower or just want to grow like one, subscribe to Growing for Market magazine for the nitty-gritty of growing, marketing, and the business of market farming. We publish 10 issues per year with articles written by experienced farmers on topics ranging from tools and techniques to farm business operations and marketing. If you've been listening to the Growing for Market podcast and haven't yet checked out Growing for Market magazine, we've made a change so you can try the magazine for free. We've added a free month to the beginning of all first-time subscriptions. Try out the digital or paper magazine for a month, and if it's not for you, cancel within 28 days and you'll never even get billed. All subscriptions get you a year of the magazine, plus 150 downloadable back issues from the last 15 years and over 1,700 archived articles. With digital subscriptions starting at just $39 a year, head on over to growingformarket.com and subscribe today to benefit from over 3 decades of writing by farmers, for farmers, in Growing for Market magazine.